1998, a town in southern West Virginia, one traffic light, a diner, and a pharmacy that just placed an order for enough OxyContin to sedate a city 10 times its size. Nobody drives out to check. Somewhere in Stamford, Connecticut, a computer logs the reorder, files it under revenue, and the number goes up. Everybody's happy. The story everybody tells about Purdue Pharma goes like this. They sold a painkiller in good faith, the science was fuzzy, and a wave of addiction snuck up on a company that never saw it coming. It's a tidy story. It's also wrong, because the thing that supposedly blindsided them was sitting in their own sales data the entire time. Let's put the myth on one side and the ledger on the other and see which one's lying. First, the pitch. OxyContin launched in 1996. The clever bit wasn't the drug. Oxycodone had been around for decades. It was the coating, a time-release shell that fed the drug out slowly, 12 hours a dose, and that coating was the whole marketing story. Because it released slowly, Purdue argued, the risk of addiction was low, really low. How low? Less than 1%. That was the number reps carried into doctors' offices. Less than 1% of patients get addicted. Where did it come from? A 5-sentence letter to the editor published in a medical journal back in 1980. Not a study, a letter, about hospital patients on short courses of painkillers. Purdue took that little footnote and turned it into a cornerstone. That's payoff one. The second one is where it starts to smell. Because here's the ledger's first entry. That 12-hour promise, the one the whole low addiction argument rested on, didn't actually hold for a lot of patients. For plenty of people, the relief wore off around hour 8 or 9. Then came the shakes, the sweats, the craving, textbook early withdrawal. Now, if you're running a pharmaceutical company and your patients are hitting withdrawal before the next scheduled dose, that is a flashing signal about dependence. You'd think the fix is simple. Dose more often, every 8 hours instead of 12. Purdue told doctors to do the opposite. Don't prescribe more often. Prescribe a bigger dose, because 12-hour dosing was the competitive advantage. It's what let them charge more and beat rival painkillers. Admitting it needed to be taken more often would have knifed the entire pitch. So the bigger the withdrawal, the bigger the next prescription. The suffering wasn't a bug in the sales model, it was the growth engine. Think of it like a carbon monoxide detector chirping in the hallway. The correct response is to find the leak. Purdue's response was to turn up the television and sell more detectors. The alarm was doing its job. Nobody wanted to hear it because the alarm was also the revenue. Which brings us to the ledger's biggest entry, and it's the one nobody at the company could plausibly ignore. The geography of the pills. Purdue tracked prescriptions obsessively. They had to. Sales rep bonuses depended on it. They knew, town by town, doctor by doctor, exactly where the OxyContin was going. And what the data showed was that enormous quantities were flowing into tiny, rural places. Little towns in Appalachia, coal country, ordering volumes that made no medical sense for their population. They also knew which prescribers were writing scripts like they were autographs. Internally, some of these doctors were flagged. Purdue had a sense of the problem clinics, the ones later called pill mills. The pattern was legible from Connecticut. You didn't need to visit West Virginia. You just needed to read your own reorder reports. And the incentives pointed the wrong way the whole time. Reps were paid on volume, and especially on high-dose volume. The bigger the pill, the fatter the commission. So the exact metric that should have triggered alarm, soaring high-strength prescriptions in places with no reason to need them, was the metric the company was rewarding people to grow. This is the part that gets me. If you'd wanted to detect the coming disaster early, you wouldn't have needed an investigative journalist. You'd have needed a junior analyst in an afternoon. The sales data was a seismograph. It registered the small tremors for years. Rising doses, early refills. Towns that shouldn't have been buying that much. Every quarter, the needle twitched. Every quarter, they filed it under a good year. Over its life, OxyContin brought in something on the order of $30 billion. That's the myth's alibi, by the way, that this was too big and too profitable for anyone to see clearly. But that's backwards. The money was the clarity. Every dollar of that revenue was a data point about where the drug was going and how fast. Now let me argue the other side because it deserves a fair hearing. Chronic pain was genuinely undertreated in the 90s. Doctors were often too scared to prescribe strong painkillers, and real people suffered for it. Purdue could say, honestly, that they were meeting a real need, and addiction science was messier then than it is now. The line between physical dependence and full-blown addiction was blurry, and reasonable people disagreed about it. If you squint, you can build a case that early on, the company believed its own pitch. Early on, maybe, but belief has an expiry date, and it's the day the data contradicts you. By the early 2000s, the pattern was undeniable. The overdoses, the abuse, the reports from the field. In 2007, Purdue and 3 executives pleaded guilty to misleading regulators and the public about the addiction risk. They paid around $600 million. That's not a company that got surprised. That's a company that got caught. And here's the tell. After the 2007 plea, after the number was public and the settlement signed, the selling didn't stop. The machine kept running for another decade. In 2020, Purdue pleaded guilty again, this time to federal charges worth over $8 billion, and the company filed for bankruptcy. The Sacklers, the family behind it, spent years fighting over how much of their fortune they'd have to give back. So set the myth against the ledger one more time. The myth says addiction was the plot twist nobody saw coming. The ledger says addiction was line item after line item, quarter after quarter, printed in the same reports that were making everyone rich. They didn't fail to see it. They saw it, priced it, and decided the number was worth it. And that's the uncomfortable lesson for anyone building a company. Your metrics don't just measure success. Sometimes they're the confession. Data that flatters you and data that indicts you often live in the exact same spreadsheet. The difference is only whether you're willing to read the second column. Purdue read one column brilliantly for 25 years. The other one, the one screaming the whole time, they left unopened. The alarm was never the problem. The problem was who profited from ignoring it.